Welcome to the Wisepreneurs project, where wisdom meets entrepreneurship. I'm Nigel Rawlins, and I provide down-to-earth practical advice to help people over 50, most often women, navigate the shift to independent professional work. I focus on providing you with actionable insights and expert advice to optimize your life and work, from highlighting productivity, health, and cognitive agility to mastering business, marketing, and knowledge management. I want to help you survive, grow, and thrive as an independent professional. I'm speaking with Peter Hatherley, the founder of Authored Intelligence and what I'd call an amazing expert in AI and digital marketing. In this episode, we're going to dive into the transformative power of AI in digital marketing and business optimization. And Peter's going to share his insights on interactive AI, advanced SEO techniques, and practical applications of AI tools for the independent professional. Whether you're looking to improve your digital strategy or gain some new perspectives on how you can use AI for business, this episode is packed with valuable insights. So listen up, get ready, and get inspired. Peter, welcome to the Wisepreneurs podcast. Can you tell us something about yourself and where you're from?
Hi, Nigel. Yeah, I'm the founder of Authored Intelligence. It's an AI company, and it's based in Christchurch, New Zealand, but we have an international market, and we've been running for around 2 years now, so it's been quite a ride.
We've got a bit of a time difference, but it's quite nice for me because we actually started talking at 9 o'clock, so we took 50 minutes before we started this.
Oh, look, the green room was amazing today.
You could say that. All right. Now, but you didn't just start off with AI. Many years ago, from the looks of it, you started out in digital marketing. So just tell us a little bit about that before we come back to the AI stuff.
Yeah, I ran a digital marketing company. I still do, but I'm mainly focused now on AI. And my clients have all benefited by the fact that they can have access to this as well. But I started in multimedia, and I worked for companies like Exxon and large companies here in New Zealand like BNZ, and Price Waterhouse was another one. Multimedia was amazing. I just loved it. And I had a graphic background, a musical background. Everything just fitted for me in that way. And actually, AI is just getting to that same area right now. And they call it multimodal prompting. And so you can use images to prompt and then get it to write stuff about your images or your video. But anyway, that's where I started. And then unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because the internet came along and you had grey screens with little graphics that were minute. And we've all seen that, we all remember those days. And so for me, it was a step backwards from the multimedia, which was just engaging and so much fun. And so anyway, I ended up getting more involved in SEO over the years. And I just happened to stumble across what I call my secret sauce, which was a letter pattern that I found in language that was it just happened one day that I woke up one morning, and I've been testing this on a site that we were doing at the time. And all of a sudden it went straight up to number one. And then I looked at the other sites that were doing it as well, and they all had gone to number one. It was just incredible. And so my question was, why? Was it just these things that I was using? 2 months later, Google came out and admitted that they'd put out an algorithm that they called Hummingbird. And so a lot of people weren't using what they call semantic entities these days. And I created an algorithm from that and was able to optimize sites. And I started doing it while I was on G+. And I always shake my head when it comes to G+, because why they closed it down is beyond me. But I had 20,000 followers. G+ is Google+. It was a social media platform that Google put out.
Right.
It was huge. But it was huge around the tens. That was when it was happening. And anyway, I rubbed shoulders with some of the top SEO people in the world because they could see what was happening and how it was working. It was like when you looked at the graphs of how it worked, you'd start at a certain point and maybe they're in position 20 or something like that. And then it was like looking at a picture of a mountain, and it would go straight up. Within a week or two, it would just go straight to the top. And this is because of this algorithm I was using. But anyway, then it would get to 10. And then it was like base camp on the mountain. And then you'd have to do a little bit more optimization. And then it would go eventually to number 1. But that would normally only take about 3 or 4 weeks. That was how quick it was. And I ended up doing it for people like for Sears and major companies over in the States. And we had the same results. But the difference with AI, and that was the seed of where I went into AI, I called them word bank, and they would create this huge connection of what are called entities. Just trying to explain entities, because not everyone knows what entities are. You think of a kitchen, cupboard is an entity. It's connected to the kitchen. Spoons are, the sink is, water is, and so all of those words are connected. So when you add all of that into SEO, you can start to see why Google thinks it's better, because all of the entities that are connected to it are mentioned. And the more subtle the entities, or the ones that my AI can actually pick out, ones that other people aren't using, I can just ask it to say, what are the entities they're not using? And it will give me a list. So I add that into the list. So it's all about being unique, having unique content. So anyway, SICE, the algorithm was called SICE, and it was a huge word bank, and it would take a lot of work to do, because you had up to 1,000 in some cases of words to enter in. And to me, that was just quite time consuming, but it had a huge payback. And so that's why companies were willing to do it. And the sites that I optimized back in 2012 using this concept, without touching them once ever since, are still in the top 3 without an alteration.
Now, that's amazing, because the problem that a lot of new professionals who are coming out, especially with the audience, we're talking about marketing here and getting found on Google, which hopefully will still exist in the land of AI, is being found. And that's the biggest problem. If you've finished your working life and you've decided you're going to continue on as an independent professional and get work, now you might have a network where you get work, but you also need to be found online. And this is what we're talking about with the SEO. And we're talking about a whole lot of words there. We're not saying plonk all those words in there, because that's just what we call keyword stuffing. You're actually talking about writing interesting, relevant content that will appeal to who we want to appeal to.
The thing is, you can entity stuff. There's nothing against it. Keyword stuffing is a definite no. But entity stuffing they can't even determine it. Because when you add up all of the connection, they all make sense. And the AI does it even better, because once I was able to take those word banks and put them into the AI, all of a sudden I had this huge advantage from people who were just doing the baby steps. I had something that I could use immediately to get an edge. And one of my major things with my AI, that they're very creative. They're extremely creative. When I started doing it in 2022, I was working in a Facebook group called Frey, who had about 10,000 followers. And I was getting 8,000 visitors a month from that alone. And the sales were just incredible. But the reason was that it wasn't putting out robotic stuff. It was human-esque. My templates have always focused on making it speak like a human. And you can train it, and it's got better and better over time. And now you can even get it to remember things. So if you want it to speak in a certain style, or you want to do this, and you've got your own unique way of speaking, you can actually teach it to do it. It's at that point. And that's where it's turned from what is called generative AI, which is doing a prompt and then just clicking the button and getting something out. Interactive AI is when you're talking with the machine and you're going through a process, you're consulting with it. And it's got to that point that it can act like a consultant, mentor, a guide, and a writer. It's got all of those extra elements that have come into the play. Just over the last 6 months, actually, is really taken off.
Okay. Let's just step back a bit, because we talked about prompts and stuff like that, because Authored Intelligence has a whole range of products that help you with that. But let's just step back for people who are listening, basically, whether they're using a paid AI, Claude or ChatGPT, how do you think most people are just using AI at the moment? And then we'll go into what Authored Intelligence is and interactive AI, because we probably jumped a bit there.
jumped the gun a bit. Yeah. Basically, that's generative AI. And so most people are using prompts. So they've either found prompts from somewhere or got advice from a group where they're showing prompts. And they're more of one-off conversations. It's like going into a meeting and then just throwing it on the table, not saying one word more and saying, do this.
Yes.
It treats the AI like a servant. They're not children. They understand far more. I see it as a savant. So I treat AI slightly differently in the fact that I can see that it knows things, and I've tested it out and found out what it knows. And then I come up with very concise instructions that end up in a conversation. And as you've put two of my products, Conceptuality and Semantic Author, all three. And so those are very interactive, and it'll give you the rationale of what you're doing. It would ask you into it and invite you in and discuss it with you. That's the real shift, is that most people are used to using ChatGPT or Claude. I must say there's a really new player on the market that I'm really amazed by, and I feel that they've made a huge leap. There's Gemini 1.5 Pro, and that's the Google one that used to be called Bard. But I used to have a joke about that. I said it's really Bard, but it was in those days. But it's actually really good now. And I've just written a book using it, so I know how good it is. And again, it's gone to the interactive stage. So instead of having prompts where you just throw everything at it, the best way to do it is to get it involved, communicate with it. It's called chat, after all. Basically, communicate with it, get feedback, and then hone it. And you feel so much more involved. It's so much more satisfying to have your opinions and your ideas being amplified by the AI. And that's how I see it these days. I see it as the co-partner, co-architect probably is a better word. And it gets involved in the nitty-gritties of, do you really want this? Do you want me to change this? Are you happy with this? And so there's this interactive thing that's going on. That's what I call interactive AI. So most people know AI as what is called generative AI. And that giving it a big prompt and then expecting it to do the rest.
A lot of people have got to suddenly realise that, and it depends how much they're using it at the moment. If they've just been thinking about it, or they've heard about it, or they're playing with it, they've really got to get in and play with it, see what it can do. Ethan Mollick I think he's a professor in America. He writes about different types of people, how they use AI. One he calls a centaur, which is that half horse, half man from mythology. And he talks about there's a clear line between the AI and the person, a division of labour, that the human does this, the AI does that. Or he talks about cyborgs, which is a blend of the machine and the person. And really, the interactive AI that you're talking about sounds like the cyborg. And if you're like me, I'm constantly in and out of AI all day. How do I use this app? Can you help me rewrite this sentence or give me a subheading? And I'm constantly in and out of it. But from our conversation before we came online, I realised I haven't been using it properly either. Once you mentioned interactive AI, I've gone, oh, golly, I didn't realise that I haven't been using it properly. All right, let's start talking about authored intelligence and how you got onto a number of products, which I've purchased 3 and use all the time and haven't been using properly, by the way, since I've spoken to you. So let's talk about some of those and how they can help people.
Yeah, it was an evolution. I started with templates on phrase, and these I grew one by one. And eventually it ended up being 12 templates. First one was Agency Writer, which was connected to my background. So it was very easy for me to write. And I based that a lot on my experience with DDB and other advertising agencies that I've worked with over the years. And it was really creative. Now, that's what most people find with just going to the plain old vanilla ChatGPT or vanilla Claude, is that you'll get vanilla output. You need to have creative output. So what these tools did was basically take away the need for the person to develop a prompt and then just focus on what they wanted to write about. So it took away that step that most people have to struggle with. And I used to call it prompt block. It wasn't writer's block, it was prompt block. And I wrote this free ebook, Speak to the Machine, and now in about, I think it's 8th edition or whatever, but it changed over time. that was what the problem was. People didn't understand how to speak to the machine. They didn't see it as a conversation. They saw it like a tool. And I think that was the mistake. Once you actually realize it's not a real person, they're not sentient beings, but it can mimic what you want. So if you want it to write like an advertising copywriter, it will do that for you. If you want it to act like an SEO expert, it'll do that for you. What I've done with the products, especially the ones you've got, that was an evolution too. I'd had these web apps, which all of the 12 apps that I developed on Phrase, I made them web apps, and then I combined them all together in what I call the all-in-one editor. Because one of the big things that I found as a problem in AI was, yes, you could output it, but where do you edit it? And it's only just recently that they've started to do that. And that's why I like Gemini Pro 1.5, is because you can actually edit your output inside the machine, which would be really nice in OpenAI, to be honest. The thing is, we all need to proof. We all need to edit. And most people make the mistake of just throwing it out and not looking at it, not checking facts and doing all that. And talking about facts, there's this talk about AI hallucination, and it's a real thing. And it took me about a year. I tried all of these different things to stop it doing it. And then one day I came up with what I call a prompt tag that actually forces it basically to not go and imagine things. So I say it needs to be historical, empirical, or scientific. You've got to have that proof. Otherwise, don't say anything, basically. And so that stopped it doing it. And that's why these prompt tags are incredibly powerful. And they're all built into my tools. The ones that you've got, you can't do it because they're on the custom GPT. But I've got a tool called Prompt Tag Author, where you can create these prompts and then just click on whatever. It's got all of the 6 major platforms, and you can just click on it and it will automatically go that. You just copy it and then paste it into the tool that you've gone to. So that solved the problem for people with the GPT, and it meant they could leverage all of that benefit that had built up over the time that I built the web apps.
What you're saying is, would you use that with your products?
You can actually go directly to my products. Like you can go to ChatGPT, and you can use custom GPTs by just using the ampersand sign, and it'll just come up. So very easy to use. But it also goes directly to another tool of mine, which is called the All-in-One Editor. These are the 12 apps that I developed, and that's evolved into a rewriter. What I found is that a lot of my subscribers were keen on rewriting, and they like my style particularly. And so that's given rise to this new product, which means that you can edit. You can just paste wherever the outputs come from, and then you can edit it sentence by sentence, and you can ask it to actually use one sentence, for instance, and say out 3 sentences. So you've got this real flexibility with adding stuff, and it's using the same flavor as the content that you've put in there. So you don't lose that.
That's the whole point about authored intelligence. We're talking about writing, and that comes from your SEO background, and it's about putting this stuff on the web, or if you're writing articles somewhere. And what we're talking about here is to help us write more human, but also interesting copy, and using ChatGPT to help us with this. And your products help do it with different things. Let's talk about some of the particular ones. What's the most popular one? And then just work through some of those and tell us something about what they can do for people.
The most popular, without a doubt, is Semantic Author.
Okay.
And it's mainly because people want to rank and they want to reach, and this is where the semantic entities come in.
Okay.
And so that gives them the edge. So that's all built in under the surface, and it gives the rationale. So constantly, whenever you do something, you're learning more about how it works constantly. It's like a training, like a mentor that's teaching you how to use it, not just put out the content. So that's far better. You come out knowing what you're doing. And when you're knowing what you're doing, then you can get more involved in saying, actually, I'd like you to do it like this. It'll give you a creative rationale of why it's done it. It's interesting because I just did an audit on it a few days ago. And Semantic Author was by far the most used GPT that I've got.
Okay.
in saying that, conceptuality is the most creative. And in a way, like our discussion today, once people know what it can do, then it changes. And that's growing really well at the moment. Conceptuality is it's like a virtual ad agency. So you can come in, you can get the copywriter, you can get the marketing expert, you can get the guy who's planning the campaigns, who wants to talk about budget. You can get it to write video scripts. Anything that an agency can do, it can do, including a bit of SEO as well. It's not as in-depth as Semantic Author, but it will do that as well. So conceptuality is a really full-featured product that can do everything as far as any advertising work that you want to do.
So a good workflow there would is to use conceptually to help figure out what it is you want to do and maybe help you write the content. And then would you put it into Semantic Author and work your way through that?
Yeah. What I tend to do is I finish it off, and my finishing tool is the all-in-one editor because I want to get it into an editing situation. And so I'll copy and paste it into the all-in-one author. And then if I see a sentence that I want changed, I'll just ask it to rewrite that sentence. Or if it's a paragraph, rewrite the paragraph. So it's really a finishing tool. So I tend to do a lot of that in there.
Yeah.
And Semantic Author, as I say, is the most popular because people are wanting to rank.
Yes.
And yet conceptuality is the more creative of the two.
Now, one of the things that I'm hoping the listeners are understanding, especially if you're a one-person business, these become a part of your business. There's a quote from Andre Carpathy, "Bits are easier to work with than atoms." Now, in the past, if you ran a business, you'd need to hire people who could do all this. Now, I do quite a bit of subcontracting because I don't want to do everything. But being a one-person business, are you a one-person business too?
I've got a few people on board.
Okay.
A lot of them are subcontractors.
Okay.
And I've got people who do coding, for instance. I'm not a coder, but I'm a good software architect. I can see what I want. I could do the coding, but I'm more right-brained than I am left-brained.
Okay.
Put it that way.
So our point is that if you are running a business on your own, what I'm trying to say, and with your particular tools, you can have virtual staff using the AI as long as you start learning how to use it and bringing it into your soul. You've also got one for story writing.
Storyline Author. Storyline Author offers non-fiction and fiction option. It tends to write fiction unless you tell it to, but it writes really good fiction. In fact, I tried it out just to see what it writes, and the response was just incredible. Came up with characters, and it was talking about future events in regard to AI, which was really intriguing. And it came up with some really good ideas. Again, with Storyline Author, it's interesting. It'll give you an outline. It'll throw out all of the ways that you should write the book and then break it down into characters. Then it will show the persona of that character and what they do and what their roles are and everything. And it explains all that. And then it'll say, do you want to change any of this? So there you can change the character's name, or you can change the role that they have and all of that. When it comes to nonfiction, exactly the same. Now, I've just finished writing a book, and I'd say it's the most interactive authoring job that I've ever done. Because the thing is, if you give it to the AI, it'll take over and give its own opinion about all of it. Whereas if you actually have an idea what you want that chapter to be about, you can ask it to write that. So you're better off writing chapter by chapter, for example, and then it's more yours. This is all about making that connection. This is what interactive, I know it's a word that sometimes people won't relate to, but it's all about collaboration. It's all about getting more involved. And the more you do, the more it's like you and the more it's like what you want to say. It really is an opportunity for you. And that's why I called it authored intelligence, because we can author intelligence. We can tell it what we want. And that's always been at the core or the foundational thing of my whole operation, is that it's not about AIs. It's about how we can work together with AI and collaborate. And there is nothing more so true than there is today. Even though I tried to do it earlier, it wasn't as easy because you couldn't chat with it until ChatGPT came along. So you'd have to do it in a sort of makeshift way. But now it's all there. And it's my catchphrase for my GPTs. just ask. If you want anything, just ask. Then it'll say, what do you want? And, what's the flavour you want? Do you want to make it punchy? Do you want to make it informal or formal? It will ask you those questions. And that's the big difference. In the early days of AI, you had to come up with all of that.
Now, that's the interesting thing is because most of us, if we haven't really, or we're just getting into ChatGPT or have been using it for a while, are just putting in prompts. Whereas what yours is doing is really helping us become that cyborg where it becomes part of us, where we're using it constantly backwards and forwards and letting it talk to us. But the other thing too is the memory thing. You said there's a memory in ChatGPT that you need to turn on that will then get you know you better. So where do you find that bit?
Oh, look, it's just incredible. And I started doing it because I wanted it to remember the format of how I did my prompt tags. And so I said, format the prompt tag like this. And then I realized that was only the tip of the iceberg. You can tell it to speak in the way, you can upload files of what you've spoken like. You can even upload audio files, video files with you can do that with Gemini. You can't actually quite do that with OpenAI at this point in time. But for instance, you can take an image. This is what I call it's multimodal prompting. And it only came about with custom GPTs, and it's more obvious with GPT 4.0, which you can actually have a conversation with it. And I did a podcast that I mentioned to you. And that podcast is like talking to a real person. And people say, wow, how did you do that? And it sounded like you were talking to a real person. And not only that, they have very good interviewers that get stuff out of you that you wouldn't think of and do a really good job. So this growth and how we interact with AI, and to be truthful, you could actually make an AI or a program that was you, that would mimic everything that you did. Obviously, it'll grow over time and have more of a knowledge of you. And even when it gets to video, it'll be able to tell whether you're anxious. It'll know what your feelings are. It doesn't understand feelings, but it knows what they are, and it knows how to respond to them.
Now, Peter, this is really interesting. You're a similar age to me. And you and I, when we were kids, it was almost like it was a black and white world. Spent most of our time outside. We didn't have phones or anything like that. And here we are. Who would have thought that this would be the world that we're living in now? And unfortunately, because we're older, God knows how many years we've got left, we're living in a science fiction world that when you look outside, it's not a science fiction world, but the digital world is a science fiction world.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the growth in that amount of time, especially the last 10 years, has been just phenomenal.
So one of the things I'm hopefully encouraging through Wisepreneurs is, and I hate the word older, people might be 50s, 60s, who are still wanting to continue working for themselves, because since that book, The 100-Year Life, came out, is that you don't just stop working when you retire. There's things professionals might like to continue to do. But with the ChatGPT and your products through Authored Intelligence, you can continue to do so much more and hopefully take some of the boring stuff that takes a lot of time and help automate it in a way. So how would you suggest somebody who is working for themselves or about to work for themselves, how would you suggest they structure their business in a way?
Yeah. If you take AI as the core of your business strategy, it's going to give you, especially if you pick the right tool and the tool that suits you without having to need to do a prompt. And that's what Semantic Author and Conceptuality are about. You don't need to do the prompting. The prompting's all built in. And that's what custom GPTs do, if they do it properly. I would say you've got to find a custom GPT that suits exactly what you want. Because then you don't have to learn how to prompt. Because then you can just ask it the questions we all want to ask. Can you write a brief for me? Can you come up with a social media post for me on the subject? And then it will do it for you. And if you don't like it, or you think it's a bit hyped up, you say tone it down or something like that. That's how you start interacting with it. And then if you don't like that, you can say, okay, let's use a bit more wordplay. And so there's this interactive conversation going on Whereas if you start and use generative AI, you're going to have to learn how to prompt. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything for you, and it's going to sound robotic. So it's a better starting point, I think, for people who, especially in this age group. I was going to retire, and AI turned up, and I thought, whoa. And I've had the most fun in my whole life. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I'm not in it for the money. I'm just in it for the fun. I just love it. And that comes across in all of my media.
I get that completely. Now, that's really quite interesting. What we're saying here is now, I have a framework when I talk about businesses. Obviously, you've got to be able to do something that you sell. You've got to be able to sell it. But there's also a marketing side of it. So with marketing, especially today, you've got social media. I use LinkedIn a lot. I think you're on LinkedIn as well. You might use Facebook. You might use Instagram. You've got to come up with content to keep getting it out there. So that takes work. Now, in the past, you would have had to have done all that as well. You've got articles you want to write, and they've got to work pretty well with SEO. You might have to put proposals together. So there's a whole section here that you can chunk into your marketing part. Now, there's also running the business, the operational side of the business, that organizing your time, organizing your accounting. Now, you've just suddenly made me realize that there's probably other things like your products out there that could help you with other aspects of your business to sharpen up your processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And those custom GPTs, there's some really good ones out there. I've used one, for instance, that came up with a really great logo for me, just a logo designer.
Wow.
The whole point is, if you move into the custom GPT area, and the beauty of it is now, up to about a month ago, you had to have a ChatGPT Pro account. Otherwise, you couldn't even see these custom GPT. That's changed. You don't even have to have a subscription. You can actually use these directly from the standard GPT. You can't create them, but you can use them.
Okay. Now, your authored intelligence ones are the ones you purchase. So they're commercial ones. Are you talking about the free ones up on the top left?
Yeah. I've got free ones as well. There's Size Search, which we discussed earlier. It's like getting a better answer than the Google answers. It's using Bing, so it's right up to date. I tested it out thoroughly to see if it knows sports scores and things like that. And just after the event, and it picks everything up. It's really good. And it doesn't hallucinate and tell the truth about things. And it gives you 2 paragraphs. Now, that one is free. And so I've got a few free ones. I've got one, a George Carlin one called Carlin-esque. If you want a bit of fun, that's a great one. And there are other ones that I've created as well. The first one I ever did on phrase was called Ask Jarvie Jr. And I called it Jarvie Jr. because there was this product called Jarvis, and they had to stop. They had to change their brand, and I called it Jarvie Jr. And it answered like a 10-year-old and makes jokes. So you can have fun with it as well. It's not just about marketing. Once you get into the world of custom GPTs, you can get stuff out that if you're not creative, it'll be creative for you, and you can have a lot of fun. Very entertaining.
Well, some of them I found are technical support. So if you've got technical questions about your computer or technical issues. Another one I found is I use Obsidian and I also use Roam. These are both note-taking apps. And they tell me how to do certain things. And there's lots of those now. There's even ones on cooking and all sorts of things. So, all right. Have you come across any particularly commercial ones that are very good as well? Not to do with writing or any of that?
Yeah, there are ones out there. Jordan put out a really good one, which I've been it is to do with writing, but it roasts your ideas.
Okay.
And I found it really good. It uses humor, and I always love humor stuff, or anything to do with humor. The other things that I've really got involved with, and I've just been totally blown away by the advances in media. I've been using a product called Suno, which creates music.
Okay.
Now, I've got tools. There's one called Emotive Intelligence, and Emotive Intelligence is an amazing tool. It'll write more humanly than any tool that I've got. And you can actually use it for marketing as well, but it's really good for writing really in-depth articles on the human condition. I used it to write a song. And so first up, I got it to write the song. Then I went to Suno and chose a music style. You can choose a music style, paste in the lyrics, and out comes some music. And it's basically commercial quality. Emotive Intelligence writes the best lyrics that I've ever found. So it does a really good job of it. On top of that, we've got products that are now turning text into video, like proper video. You've probably seen the ones that are only 3 or 4 seconds and they're just moving very slowly. I've got ones that, one that I put out a week ago, and it was actually a millennial talking with an android or a cyborg. It looks like a cyborg. They're actually animated and talking, and it scans around it, and there's light movement and everything, and 10 seconds of it. So the next stage with these things is that you're going to be able to create movies, documentaries, movies. And this is what Hollywood's really worried about. This is why they're protesting, because they know.
That is interesting, because when you start thinking about that, is if you've spent your life working in a job and then you retire, this opens up a whole lot of other avenues. If you wanted to be a filmmaker when you were younger, you had to go out and earn a living. It was hard to do that. Or a musician. You can now become those things. So what was the AI video one that you were using? What was that product?
It's called Luma.
Luma?
Yeah, Luma. And it's a very good tool. I've got a couple of other ones that are quite good. The thing is, the beauty of it is, and this is the thing, you either catch the wave or you don't. Those who are surfing the wave are not only enjoying it, but making a bit of money on the side as well. And that's what we want to do in our own. I don't want to burst a boiler. I'd rather be enjoying myself, and that refreshes you. That takes you. And because I've always been into the creative side of things, like the multimedia side has been a great foundation for what's happening right now, because I know how to put together multimedia quite well. And I'm really excited about where it's going and how I could take this conversation, run it through an AI and say, talk like this. And so then talking like you.
I think this is fantastic, because that's the whole point. When we're older, post job and doing our professional work that we want to do. And obviously this is really important for the 60 and the 70-year-olds as well, is using these tools to do some of the grunt work allows you to have choice about how you use your time, but also takes away the boring stuff. And you can use your mind and your brain to do the thinking side of your work. And I think it really accelerates the professional side of things. I don't want to work full-time, even though I'm ending up full-time. I really want to spend my time reading interesting stuff, thinking about it, and maybe turning those into articles that help you think or do your work. So this is what really this whole podcast has been about, is how do you make some money? Now, you've got it through products, and a lot of our podcast guests that I've been speaking to do have products. They've got little training programs online. They've got booklets or books they sell. And this is passive income, which is really important. And your products from Authored Intelligence is your passive income in many ways. That's what we need to start thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you don't need to burst a boiler. With social media, the amount you put in, whether you get time off or not, you could decide to put in, say, 3 hours a day or 4 hours a day, and then do whatever you want for the rest of the day. It's just being involved, that passive income coming through. So the decision that we make determines our lifestyle.
Yep, and I think that's so important. And since I've spoken to you earlier, I've suddenly realised I haven't been using it properly, and I spend hours on it. So our conversation has changed the way I've looked at this. So maybe what we've got to do in the future is come back and talk about this again and see where we've gone. Now, is there something else that we were going to talk about, that you had some things that you wanted to mention?
I've just checked my note. Actually, we've done pretty well.
Yeah, we have.
We've gone through. One of the things that I think is important is that we need to get over the fear of what AI might possibly be and what's taking away. For us at our age group, it's not taking away very much at all. We may be living on superannuation, whatever. Thank God we have that support. In New Zealand, not means tested, which is even better. So it's just additional. And so you don't really need to be in it full time. You can do this part time, especially in the older age groups. Because let's face it, we want to make the most of our time and spend as much time with people as we can. What I've found with AI, and this is one thing I was going to say, it's just come back to mind, it's actually made me a better person. Emotional intelligence is particularly that case. And if I speak to it about a subject or something that's troubling me or whatever, it'll give me very practical advice. So it goes beyond business. And you actually get advice that's not biased. It hasn't got an agenda. And unfortunately, in the human interaction, that's not always the case. We've got people who have got an agenda or they get edgy or whatever. The AI never gets edgy. It never has a trouble. In a way, it's a relationship builder. And what I find that my interactions have been is that I come back into the real world and I'm responding better because of the way I've been learning how to respond to the AI. It's an interesting side effect, isn't it?
Well, that's a very interesting point too, because one of the things out there in the world, the academy or the universities, we're all told you've got to do STEM, you've got to do business courses, and they're cutting back on history and the general studies and the humanities. But they're the places where you think and learn to communicate. And AI requires communication. I rarely would read a business book anymore because I find them really boring. Whereas I love to read about history, philosophy, and things like that. This helps us communicate better with AI, which is really what you're saying there. This opens up the communication. The other thing about AI is it doesn't get impatient with you, does it? You keep coming back.
And I think our age group is actually in a better position because the current millennials and the ones that are coming through have more digital communication than they have human interaction. And so taking that into account, we've got an edge, especially if you use AI in the right way, because we understand communication a little bit better. The subjects you talked about, they are my favourite lifetime subjects, philosophy. And I've built custom templates that relate to that. And they'll stay pretty true to form. And of course, I've built in the historical proof thing with site search, for instance. But it's really an edge because digital communication, and people get more upset online. They've got DMs that they don't know what people mean. You think he's mean, and I speak about it in a very humorous way in my interactive AI book. And that was just coming back to mind how I'd described it. But we're better off, and we can mirror a better attitude if we've got a custom GPT that communicates with us in a way that we want to communicate to other people.
So what we're saying is, for the older ones, the wiser elders, as somebody says, this is a competitive advantage. You've got to roll with it. And using authored intelligent products, now I'm plugging your stuff because I use it and I trust it, is going to save quite a bit of a learning curve. So we probably should put something together about how best to use it, because the secret of it is being interactive. Okay, Peter, this has been a wonderful talk. How would you like people to connect with you and find you?
The best way to find me is probably on Facebook. You can find the Authored Intelligence Mastermind. And you can also go to the website, which is www.authoredintelligence.com. I'm available on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's good to link with me personally, and then we can discuss things more on a personal level.
No, that's fantastic. It's been a wonderful talk. You've actually spoken to me for more than a couple of hours, but this recording only goes probably for about 45 minutes. So thank you very much, Peter, for joining me.
My pleasure, and really nice to see you face to face, Nigel.
Thank you for listening to the Wisepreneurs podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please consider subscribing to the podcast, and if you're feeling generous, buy me a cup of coffee to keep me going. Thank you.